So the goal of this talk is going to be really to talk about how you want to structure. You need to structure your design system when you don't have like a design system team, specifically on the designer part. Most of the time, sometimes you have designers, but they are not dedicated to design system because lack of resources, whatever. And that's going to be the goal of this talk. So about me, Thibault, front-end developer for a bit more than 12 years now, mostly React. I really love UX, Agile, and craftsmanship. I'm implementing design system for 4 years now, and I'm maintainer of tools that can help for design system. So what is a design system? I think most of you know, that's why you are here, but I'm gonna still repeat it a bit. So a design system is three things. It's standards and guidelines. For example, in terms of the guidelines in terms of accessibilities. For example, if you have a design system for cars, but maybe you have some specific guidelines for the software in the cars. It includes, for example, really the main goal of the design system, the vibe behind the design system. To give you another example, material UI was basing everything based on layers of papers, and that's all the things that came with the material UI. Or the new Apple UI is more based on glass, like everything has glass effect and things like that. After you have the style guide, which is just typography, color, spacing, all these kind of things. It's also called now the reference tokens with a Figma world. And the third part is reusable components, which is the part we're going to talk mostly today. And of course, you have a lot of benefit of design system, but the important part of design system is that it's a combo of two things, the design and the development. And you need both. If you have only the code part, might not work as good as it could. And if you only have the design part, it will definitely not work very well. So, of course, in the ideal world, you have a strong design system team. You have designers, front-end developer, and accessibility experts. And you have also other profile, but definitely these three profiles are the main ones. And they have a vision. They have a vision that, okay, we want to bring our design system there. We want to limit what is inside our design system. And so, for example, they're going to know for a specific component, say, okay, we're going to have three variants, that's this three variant, and that's all. And so if you have three variants, you can implement directly in your component. There is three variants. And inside the component, you can have all these three versions and having like kind of a property, for example, in React saying, I'm variant default, I'm variant admin, I'm variant disable, and it works well. In the real world, it's not like this. Most of the time, you don't have, but not most of the time, sometimes you don't have designer to maintain the design system. And so as a developer, you're a bit alone. You have sometimes a designer coming once a month saying, oh, by the way, I want that in my design system. But that's all. You don't have people, designers that have a vision and show you that for the next 2 years, this component is good, or this component can be incrementally improved. But voila, sometimes you have designers that every 2 weeks come with a new version of the variant and things like that. And you're going to need to find a way to adapt and put constraints. So you really need to be really pragmatic. So first of all, standard and guidelines. If you're only developer, you skip this part totally from my point of view. You don't care of is it a glass style or paper style. You do what you can and that's all. For the style guide, you try to extract the style from the feature mockup. So I hope you're gonna still get mockup from designers, mostly like related to really specific feature that the developer need to implement. And based on that, you're gonna extract, okay, based on my mockup, I know that I need to have this color in my design system. I need to have this typography in my design system. I need to have this set of icons, things like that. And to be honest, the style guide is not the bad part because designer, specifically UI designer, are very good to give you this kind of things. Like, you know, they are really good to say, oh, I want this palette of color. Like this kind of things is not really the hard part. The hard part is mostly the reusable component. You need to use patterns to enforce flexibility and consistency in the same times. So that, voila, if a designer comes with a slightly different version of the component, you are able to provide it. But you still need to find a way that, like, the typography don't change to every component, and you have buttons at the end that are all different styles. So for the first step, you try to use an existing library. Okay, let's be clear. If you don't have a design system, a team with designers, don't try to redo everything yourself. Use MUI or Chatsi and UI. That's my go-to. And the reason behind, like, these two libraries are very good to structure your sim and the base components. You're gonna have a bunch of components coming out of the box, and it's good. And they come with a way to have a sim. And for example, for MUI, you can have different sim, switch from one sim to another. ChatDCN is the same. So it's really give you really good for that. And of course, if your company is a bit larger and you have more developer, you can try different libraries, like Answer Design is really good, or directly Tailwind without ChatCN on the top. Second topic is about atomic design. I know everybody say, okay, let's go with atomic design. That's good. You have atom, molecule, organism, blah, blah, blah. It's cool in theory, but in practice, a design system is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So you always need to adapt to your situation. And also, when you have a design system for your company, the design system needs to answer your needs. It's not like you don't want just a palette of all the base component input, calendar, and things like that. You want components that are useful for your business. You want, for example, I don't know, if you are an insurance company, but maybe you need inside your design system a form with first name, last name, email, phone number. If you reuse it in a lot of places, it makes sense to have it in your design system. If you are a bank, but maybe you need to have a input for a credit card that is inside your design system, because it makes sense. You're going to reuse it everywhere. It's not just a feature component. It's inside your design system. So same thing. Atomic design. You should adapt to your situation, to be a bit pragmatic. So from my point of view, I don't have any problem to have a domain-specific component inside your design system, like I said. You have the right to include some logic in your design system. If you have a specific way to have error management, why not putting inside the design system so it's reused by everybody? And again, what you're gonna put as atom, molecule, or organism, you need to support your request of balance, of flexibility, and consistency. So, for example, one example that we follow in our company is like we mostly differentiate what is atom, molecule, and organism, not specifically on the size of the component, but more, for example, if it has domain-specific properties. So, for example, for atoms, our atoms in our company, most of them could be reused in another company. But as soon as we are in molecule, it starts to be really closer to our business, which is, for example, travel industry for us. And however, we say, okay, for molecule, no business logic, only UI component. Atom and molecule are UI component. We don't want any logic inside. However, we say, okay, for organism, we accept all the logic we want. And something that I'm gonna really show later, and it's one of the keys that we are able to maintain the balance of flexibility and consistency, is that for atom and molecule, we give a lot of flexibility. I'm gonna give the pattern we use after, but we really give a lot of flexibility, and like there is no one default variant. Everybody can customize them a bit. However, for organism, it's a bit the opposite. There is one variant, and you can customize small part on this variant, but there is one main variant for everybody, and it's mostly for larger component. For example, we have a component for that it describes the page. You can override the title, you can override a few things, but the layout will be the same. You can have a header, you can have a footer, and things like that. So that's the most important part for today. It's about React patterns. So today I'm going to describe a lot of the patterns, and then I separated them in the pattern that from our point of view should be mostly used for atoms. Some of them should be more used for molecules, and some of them for organisms. The goal today is not for you to remember all the names. Anyway, I will go through all of them, but at least remember the goal behind. And anyway, the slide will be available. There is a repo with everything. So if you want to reproduce this pattern on your project, just go to the GitHub, and it's all good. So first pattern in React, very easy to use, composition pattern, and it's also, of course, exists in Angular, Vue.js, so something very easy. You put a property that is a type React node most of the time in React, and you can add, for example, in this case, an decorator for your input, for example, this one or this. So now the good thing is really easy to use, a lot of flexibility. The cons is like there is no interaction between the parent component and the child. So it means the input just can, the only thing it can control is that I render or I don't render. It cannot give in extra things. Second one, so this one on purpose I did it a bit complicated, so that you understand the goal behind. Like, imagine you have an input, and instead of passing one child, I'm passing my children inside some specific component. For example, the start decorator and the end decorator. And so after in your input, you get the children, and you are able to extract from the children what is a start decorator and end decorator, and I put it wherever I want. So this pattern is mostly used in models, cards, and other components that are really like based on the DOM. But it was really one example where you can provide a lot of information in the children instead of using dedicated property. In this situation, you could also use one property for start decorator, one property for end decorator. But depending on the use case, you don't want to have 100 of properties. And specifically, if you want to provide directly the GSX there, because if you put properties, it's going to increase the indentation. While there, it's a bit smoother. It's going to be flatter. But again, mostly used for models and car like this. So render prop. So this one is the goal is to solve a bit the problem of the cons of the composition pattern that you cannot have interaction between the parent and the child. And it's just like you provide, in fact, a function as a property, a function or directly a component. You have the two options. Me, I prefer using a component because then the component can have its own life cycle. It can have access to context, to all the nice things of React, all the benefit of React compiler and things like that. But some you can see this pattern with directly using a function too. And so you provide a component there, and when you in the input you use a component. And the nice thing is, since it's a component, but you can pass value properties. In this case, value and unchange. And so, for example, if I do that, you see that it's able to detect there is the text is the text, there is some text, so he can show the button and he can remove it. So the pro of this one is like you can pass a function or a component, so a lot of flexibility, interaction between the parents and the child, and it really works with the GSX. However, it doesn't work very well for behaviors because there is still a component. You render a component, so it's mostly done to render something. It's not to add an extra behavior to the input. So all the patterns I showed before, they all use the same principle of inversion of control. Composition, React slots, React render prop. They all remove the logic from atom and molecule, and they pass it to the parent component. So it's really one of the principles of the solid principle. But now it seems that in all these situations, every time the logic or the extra behavior of the extra UI is controlled by the parent component. So sometimes this kind of situation makes the logic, we make that you duplicate the logic, because every time you have this pattern, for example, the composition pattern, the parent needs to do something, every situation. So how you want to make this logic reusable and easier to use. So imagine you create a hook. This hook returns a function that is, in fact, returning some just an object, and you can pass it like this. So it means that this input has, in fact, you provide to this input the property value, unchange, on decorator. So there is few reasons why we like to use a function. Is because if you use a function, if for example you have like 5 times this hook, you're gonna be able to call 5 times the function. if you have a conditional rendering, and unfortunately, hook needs to be before the condition, or the conditional rendering. So you need to have this one first. But if, for example, this input is not rendered, maybe you don't need to execute this function. So that's why we use function instead of just giving directly the properties there. And so with this example, for example, I'm adding an extra behavior that, okay, I want, as soon as with this hook, every time I pass the property, I'm going to add all the behavior of a credit card text field. So it means that it's going to format automatically putting space. If I try to use a letter, for example, there I'm using A, not doing anything, and things like that. So all the pattern comes right away inside this hook, and so it's quite easy. You don't need to create an extra component. You can just say, okay, I want a component that is a credit card input. Use this hook. Boom. So pro, a lot of flexibility. Why a lot of flexibility is like, I didn't show exactly, but there you can even pass another property there. And so you can override specifically, in addition of the normal credit card behavior, you can add an extra small behavior and saying, oh, in fact, the end decorator going to be something else. It's really possible there. That's why it gives flexibility. However, it has a lot of cons. The maintainability when you have a lot of hooks like this. For example, sometimes we have components that we have 15 hooks like this at the beginning to describe the behavior of each of the input or each of the component of the in this page, and it starts to be really, really heavy because you're gonna have this this logic in one page, and in this other page that is another payment form, you're gonna again this 15, but if you fix the bug in one place, maybe you won't fix it in the other one. And some developers are going to start to override. But because it's a lot of hooks, and still these things start easy to read. But when you have like in the GSX, you have 15 of them there, start to be a bit heavy, and it starts to be very hard to understand what was the difference between the two components. One version with this 15 hooks and the other component with the 15 hooks. It's really hard to see. To match and see what are the difference between the two. So we're gonna there. That's where in our company we say, okay, all the pattern we showed before, they are more dedicated for atoms and molecules. So that you add extra behavior with using for example the previous pattern, the hook pattern I just showed. But sometimes you really say no. Okay, my component we are really flexible now. For the components that are more logic. Again, for example, I give the example of components that have like 15 hooks like this. It starts to have, seems like it's a component with a lot of logic. Maybe it's a time to have an algorithm for that. It's not, you cannot just go in all your features, all your pages, having only atom and molecule and 15 hooks to describe all the behaviors. We need to constrain a bit the genericity we got in for atom and molecule and use a different paradigm for organism. So let's start with, for example, an organism that is a calendar. Okay, it has a lot of features. You can do that. You can select. You can clear. One pattern that is inspired from MUI and quite smart, I think, is that you create a property slot props, and inside this property slot props, you pass an object. And for example, action bar is one of the components inside the organism. So it means you have a basic organism. If you don't use the slot prop property, it already works out of the box. But you can override one small part inside this component. And really in MUI, it's as easy as this property is the name of the subcomponent of the calendar component. And so, for example, this one is one of the property. We say, okay, for the component action bar, I'm gonna change the property action. And at this time, I put it to today and clear. And for example, it automatically adds the button today inside. So the nice thing with this kind of behavior is like you have a default version, and instead of having two versions when you are not able to see the difference between like when I was saying two components with 15 hooks in each, this time you're gonna really see what is the difference between the two, because the difference between the two is only this part. So it's quite easy. If you have two versions of the calendar in your features, you're gonna say, okay, this version, for example, I overrided the action property. On this one, I overrided another property, for example. So really easier to read. But the base is the goal of the paradigm behind an organism like this is like you have one variant, the default variant that already works out of the box. And you just override one small part, not like, for example, the composition pattern that in fact you change a big thing. So the good pro is like it's really a targeted customization. You don't customize everything, you just customize the small things. And the default variant works. However, the cons is like it's really heavy in terms of code if you have too many customization for the same component. Imagine I have my calendar and I want to customize 10 components of it, and each component I want to override one property. The slot props part is going to be very huge. Like it's going to be a 20 line, and it's 20 line of not JSX because it's just object. So you don't have a good indentation directly in the JSX. So maybe it's better to define the property before. But if you define the property before, you lose a bit the context of what's going on. This slot props, is it for this component or for another component? So really heavy if you want to customize a lot. And also a second cons is like you can only, like this kind of pattern really works when you want to override one just a component, a child component of this calendar. But if you want a deep child, like a child of a child of a child, it's going to be super heavy. You're going to need to, okay, in this action, which is property, maybe you can, in this action bar, maybe I can use a property slot props and, you know, like making it a bit recursive, but it's going to be like too much heavy, and most of the time you don't see the developer doing that, it's too heavy. So it means like it's very good to customize the first layer of children and not too much later. So you have exactly the same one, but instead of overriding the properties, you override directly the subcomponent. So instead of passing, so the property name is a bit different. Instead of slot props, slots. And instead of overriding the property you pass to action bar, you directly say, okay, you add a component action bar. I don't want this one, I want to pass my own component. That's a nice way to when you really want to change the behavior in a different way. Like this one, most of the time, you like you change the behavior. For example, you can change the behavior, but it's you change the behavior in the way that it was already designed by the component initially. It means like this component action bar was accepting, for example, this property action with some specific value. There you say, okay, like, your action bar was not at all doing what I want. I'm gonna override the whole component so that I can put whatever I want. So in this use case, I made it a bit easier. I say, okay, your clear action I didn't like. I didn't want text. I want a cross. So that's the way it works, and the behavior is the same. So a small difference is a small addition we can add to that is like we started to use these slots and slots prop pattern a lot in our design system. Again, following MUI, you can find MUI component with these properties. But at some point, it was limited, and we say, okay, why not directly have a context? Like you say, for all this page, for example, I want to override a behavior. And so you can say, okay, for example, all the action bar, I want to use this component instead. And with this option, it really helped us a lot because for example, in our company, we have a lot of different business units. And sometimes we work with airline companies, sometimes with cruise company, and they want totally different things. But the components below were the same because like we have the same UI, but at the top we are able to say, okay, for this specific use case, we want, for example, the icon to be a plane because yes, you are working with the flight company, so you want a plane. For the cruise company, but you want a boat. But the component below, really like 10 level below, are the same. But on the top, we say, okay, for all these components, we know that we override the icon. So really, really good to specific behavior when you want to apply to a whole product or a whole page. However, of course, you don't. It's always pro and cons. It's gonna be very hard to target a specific component. Like for example, in this situation, what do? You override all the action bar, I guess, not just one. So it means like you cannot do crazy magic either. You are a bit still blocked. If you have two action bar, they will be both overridden. So as a conclusion, first of all, if you need to have a design system and you don't, it's going to be hard without designer. Let's be clear with that. And you're going to require very good architectural choices on your side to be able to maintain component. Otherwise, really quickly, I'm going to be clear, it goes and you have 100 of variant of your component. So first of all, stick to libraries. When you have to maintain a design system, your priority is not choosing, okay, I'm going to create my own component myself. No, go with existing components. You're going to have enough work with the architecture. So MUI, ChatCN. I think atomic design still makes sense, but really build it the way you want. Don't say always, okay, a molecule should be always multiple atoms, and an organism should be multiple molecules. Sometimes us on our side, we have organisms. They don't include any molecule or any atom. They are just components that are business logic and domain-specific code, and that's all. And of course, the important part is React pattern. So you have mostly composition and React slot for atoms, random props that are very useful for molecules, props getter in parallel of atom and molecules, and the pattern of the custom slots, subcomponent, and context override for organisms. So the naming of all these patterns are not always clear. To be honest, you find I tried to use a name that I found in some courses online or things like that. But some of them, for example, prop getter is you found it. The most, like for example, the custom slot and subcomponent, same thing. The names are not very clear. You see them in the MUI documentation, but you don't see them in some other places. So don't stick too much to the names, but maybe if you think it might be useful for you at one point, just say, okay, I'm gonna use this hack with a hook, and that's gonna work. So of course, I want to be clear. Design system, implementing a design system requires a lot more than what just I showed. Specifically about documentation, testing, accessibility. So documentation, for example, with Storybook. Testing, and yes, accessibility. So, and also, no, I think that's all. Okay, so do you have any question? And that my contact there, and the link to the repo, the GitHub repo. Okay, merci beaucoup.